Good morning, doctor. I was thinking today about orthodontic treatment, and we just finished a course on exam records, diagnosis, treatment planning, and conference. And why did I even do that course? You know how to do an examination. You learned in dental school what to look for in the patient's mouth. You know what? Orthodontic examination is something that we really don't hear a lot about, even when we learn our orthodontic treatment protocols. Even when we're trained orthodontically, the exam, based on all of the parameters, all the data that you derive, it doesn't happen so many times. So many times it's sketchy because the early training wasn't there. And I've been thinking about that. It's kind of like, because if you have a foundation, living in the UAE, the foundation for the buildings that they're building is sand. Think about it. So they have to plan these really deep in the sand, down into the water posts, columns, I don't know what you call them, to build a building like the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world, on something, because the foundation is essentially on sand. So when we are doing orthodontic treatment, we want to know all about that foundation. We want to be sure that we're covering the needs in the foundation for what we're going to be doing. And that's something that doesn't happen enough of the time, mostly because nobody really sat down and said, look, this is what you need to know. And guess what happens? You get into your treatment, you get to the end of your treatment, and all of a sudden, eek, now we're into something that we like to call orthodontic finishing. We can avoid a lot of those pitfalls, a lot of those iatrogenic creations, a lot of those patient organism growth, muscle-related pitfalls, happenings, by just doing our examination with records, gathering the data, and doing what we should say is diagnosis. Our foundation is diagnosis, okay? So now, are we on sand? I remember hearing years ago that we were talking about foundations, and they were talking about the skyscrapers in New York City. And this was a geology lesson that had been taught to the children, and they said the Bronx is nice, and it was on this stone called gneiss. I don't know how you spell that. I looked it up one time, but I don't remember. But Manhattan is schist. Manhattan sits on a rock called schist. And that gives them the ability to build skyscrapers without as much concern for the foundation shifting or collapsing, see? So here we are back to our foundation for our orthodontic treatment, and it is diagnosis. And guess what? Your diagnosis is going to change everything for you, even though the treatment plan ends up looking so similar from patient to patient. For example, well, I'm going to do sagittal correction because sagittal first. Now that's the absolute rule in my book. Then I'm going to do transverse expansion, and then I'm going to complete my wire sequences, right? Yes, but did you know your foundation? Did you know from looking at sagittal correction whether that patient is growing as a possible excessive mandibular growth? That changes everything, because you better overcorrect a little bit extra to accommodate for that and watch it like crazy, right? Did you know that they need expansion when it doesn't look like it, because you had a frontal x-ray and you could see the root angulation of the lower 6-year molars and the crown actual position. And once you get those brackets and tubes and wire sequences going and rectangular wires, guess what? Those molars are going to upright where they should be, between the two cortical plates. So that tooth should be between the two cortical plates in the ideal position, and the body puts stuff back. The body is going to do that later if you change it. So the point is, you need to know where that tooth should end up, and will probably, if there's not absolute retention, which there never is. And you need to be sure that you've expanded the upper to accommodate. But how do you know that if it doesn't look like it, right? Let me tell you how you know it. Diagnosis. Getting your foundation absolutely figured out. You know what that rock bed is in that patient. You know what their growth or muscle behavior is, because even in an adolescent or adult dentition, they're not growing. Big deal. Oh yes, it's a big deal. You want to know what their muscles are doing. You want to have done a muscle exam. You want to have done an examination of, what about the airway? Have you looked at that? I have a patient that the mother called me recently after 7 years of not seeing the patient. She's all grown up in college now, and her airway issues that were never ever treated, even though we recommended it, all of a sudden have become evidenced in the changes in her vertical. You see, and the mother is concerned, and I'm honored that she trusted me to ask me what should happen so that I could get back to the basis, the foundation from the diagnosis that we did years ago. The foundation on which you treat that patient is called diagnosis. It includes so much information. Even the chief complaint that the patient comes in with, I don't like my protrusive upper incisors. Why are they protrusive? Is it a forward tongue? Is it a history of habit? Is it mouth breathing? If you don't know what's going on, you can treat. You can overpower that foundation. You can overpower that information that you don't know with your brackets and wires. But is it going to be stable? No. So stability is a problem no matter how you look at it, but things get so much better when you have a good diagnosis and you are addressing as well as possible. Now, I grant you, the human organism is variable and often not totally predictable because every body behaves differently, but there are certain factors that you should have studied, looked at, gotten data on, and gotten a really strong foundation. Build on that foundation. Build on your diagnosis. And then when it comes to later in the treatment, and we'll talk about this in another video, that finishing becomes so much less, so much easier, so much less of an issue because you have treated along with your eyes wide open on your diagnostic data, knowing what might happen. And when you see something starting to happen, you can address it right then. You expect it. You'll notice it quicker. These are all things to consider. I'm going to let you go with that today. Think about it. Understand how fantastic your exam, your records, and pulling the data out of those and putting it into a true diagnostic framework will change the treatment that you do. The simplest, easiest treatment in the world will be better. That's my thoughts for today, doctor. Good day.